Welcome to the Building and Sustaining Indie Game Studio panel. We have some reasonable questions about indie status of some people here in the panel, but we will not, this is the topic we will not discuss during the panel, but feel free to attack their status at a later date. Each of our studios has survived for quite a while. We have Exor Studios.
Hello.
17 years and going strong, right? Think Drunk and Anshar Studio. You are both at 12, so that's quite good. Reasonably well. Yeah, we have Fool's Theory at 9 years old, and yours truly, Monster Couch, at 8 years old. So we are definitely doing something well. So we will, we have survived, at least so far. So we will talk about what are the common things between running a 15 people team and a 170 people team, and we'll talk about securing funding, we'll talk about ways of working, and we will talk about growing our studios. So this is like the three main things that I want to discuss. And we will have some time, unlike Augusta, for questions. Yeah, cheers. It's been a great talk. Please don't kill me. And to kick things off, I think we are past the introductions, so we all know who are people here. So to kick things off, Constante, you've been drinking water, so that's the end of your drinking water, and you have went through some weird options and stuff when it comes to funding your studio. You mentioned mergers, VC, and tell us more about that.
Initially, we were self-funded because actually we're going I think without going bankrupt. I've been continuously heading studios for 18 years right now because we closed our last studio to open this studio, so we technically didn't go under. In Think Tank we initially were self-funded, so we had basically an internal investor who is also a business partner, and even though our games sell well and break even and even earn, we are still looking for more money because we kind of like money, and money is very important for growth. So we explored both venture capital and which has that's not a panel, I guess, to talk about that. And we've been working with publishers, which also has a different set of pitfalls and basically pitfalls. So
there's a bunch of different ways to fund your studio. So you've been funding it through making successful games, but also trying to risk some other people's money, working with publishers.
Funding for successful games works only if you have a game that earns insanely well, or you make good games that earn, and you make them in quick succession without dwelling too long on one game, which we are not very good at because we tend to, we want our games to be the best they can be, and it's expensive.
And you work on a single game at a time, or how does that work?
Yeah, sadly, yes. We from the get-go, our ambition was to have two teams working in parallel on two titles, which would lead to lower overhead because the designer team can work on. Usually, designers have more work in the initial phases of the production, so they could once the game goes into full production, we could swap the design team with the other project. However, that's first of all expensive, and second of all, you kind of need a bigger team, and growing is painful.
Yeah, so that's a different. So how does funding work at the other end of the spectrum? Kuba, Łukasz, how are you funding your studios?
I mean, apart from having a budget for a project, big projects that we do, right, for a number of years, your everyday best strategy is basically doing work for hire on markups. This is something that Łukasz taught me when we were in a tight spot. But yeah, basically doing work for hire or projects on not rev share but markup allow you to build up a good money pillow, basically, that then you can invest in growing your studio, because that's basically how we grew. We released our first project, 7, which got really good reviews, but crappy sales. And we didn't recoup and didn't have funding, basically, and money to operate. So what we started to do is we started doing work for hire with markups, and then we would invest all of the earned money and markups to hire more people, basically. And this way, we've managed to grow from, I think, 5 people to 20 in a year and a half, which also is kind of giving you more momentum, right? Because the bigger the team you have, the bigger the projects you can get, and the bigger the projects you can get, the more money and bigger markups, and the bigger markups, the bigger the below, right? Yeah. And it goes and goes and goes and goes.
But one challenge I see here, and we went through that phase as well as at Monster Couch. We, after our indie darling, that darling to us, but not necessarily to anyone else, project went to hell. We've done porting and it went to Valhalla, yeah. So we've done porting, but then how do you switch back from doing work for hire?
That's the neat part. You don't.
Yeah, you don't. But
no, you don't. Like, you do. Basically,
do you?
At certain point, when you grow enough. So what we did is basically when we grew to like 20 people, at certain point we knew that we wanna move with our next project forward, which then later on became the Thaumaturge, is we started earning so many markups, and the pillow was that big that we managed to have, like, I think it was 3 or 4 months of funding for 3 or 4 people. So you start a little seed team that can start working on a prototype and pitch, and then you start traveling and pitching it to the publishers, basically, right? And as soon as you publish and get the budget for the full game, you just drop all of the other work for hire stuff, or if you're smart, you don't, because it's extra money that gives you revenue, right? But you basically switch your focus to developing your own project. This is how we did it, and then we managed to grow from 20 to 60, right, and finish the Thaumaturge.
Yeah, we did it like that as well. So we were working on outside projects, we got a money pillow, and then we started working on our own title. I mean, we were always working on it, but then the pillow ran out, and we had to get external funding from a bank. We almost bankrupted, and that's a scary story, so you have to be careful with that, but it worked for us. So you can abandon work for hire, but it's a scary story.
Yeah, I agree. I forgot about one thing. Like at the very beginning, when we were trying to look for work for hire, what I did is went to the bank as well and get the money and use that money to actually get that work for hire. And then the first money that we earned were actually used to pay off the bank, and then started growing the money. This is a big lesson I learned. I was always scared of banks when I was starting a studio, but when push comes to shove, you either close down the studio or go to the bank, and they're just regular institutions. So, if you can get money from them, I advise you do so, but have a plan on how to get out of that debt.
Yeah, I think that for us at least, they were less scary than getting a publisher, right? They were a safer option, but it's harder to get a bank loan.
So, Łukasz,
I think he should say a little bit more about working for hire.
Let's maybe not give him the mic just yet, but I saw you nodding somewhat in depression and somewhat in agreement.
No, it's just that the version of history by Kuba is so optimistic, right? And our story is very similar, but I view it in a totally different lens, right? Maybe I like the successful mindset or something, I don't know. But the thing is that Ansher Studios continue to grow because it was, I call it escaping forward, right? It's like, hey, I don't have enough money, so I need a bunch of more projects for work for hire. I don't have people capacity to do it, so I hire some bunch of people, right? And but then I run out of money, so I get some new projects, I hire a bunch of people, and that's how we ended up at 170. Like, I'm simplifying stuff, but I wouldn't say that it was a successful streak. Somewhere in the middle, we had like a huge pillow that in the hindsight, it could have been like a house or 3 houses or something, but hey, we created Game Deck, right? And the thing is that that's the version of history where everybody dreams about the XOR scenario, right? Is that from that pillow, you build up momentum, you build up your games, and you make 1, 2, 3, 4, and suddenly it clicks, and you have a hit. And I don't know what afterwards, because I never had a hit. So like, I don't know how life after that works.
The story goes on.
But the thing is that on our side, it was always the hustle, right? It's like, so if you ask me how to get out of work for hire, from my perspective, I mean, I don't know how to do it without a hit, and I didn't have a hit yet.
It's just get a hit, right?
I don't think you have to have a hit. I mean, all of our previous games before the Rift Breaker, they weren't hits. I mean, Zombie Driver sold enough to pay our bank loan, and then we got like 6, then 12 months of buffer. So we were, for the past 15 years, we've never had more than a year of financial buffer, and we've built all of our games from that. So right now, if I would be building, I would be building games that I can always release within a year, right? So build games more modular. This is how we created the Rift Breaker, because our previous games, they were like our more of design darlings. We wanted them to be perfect. With the Rift Breaker, we set our goal. We knew that this game won't be perfect. We want it to be modular. We want to be able to release it within a year in early access, or to be able to get a publisher or something when we run out of money. Because for the past 15 years, we always had that mindset that we're running out of money. I mean, we're constantly running out of money, right? It's all about time. Money is time, so you're always buying time. And working with that contingency, we were lucky enough that we were able to work on additional projects that were our projects. I mean, we ported our older games to Switch, to Xbox, to PlayStation. We did some projects on our IP for tech companies, because we're an engineering company. They paid us to do our own technology for them, which was pretty cool. But we were able to extend the deadline so much that we didn't have to launch in early access, and that allowed us to launch full. So it was like, brick by brick by brick for 15 years.
Yeah, but the disclaimer here is that all of the projects were profitable, right?
Yes, they were all profitable. So you have to have some degree of success to get this working.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move to the ways of working, and I wanted to maybe shift the discussion again to Kuba and ask you. You have 120 people team, and you're 110. Okay, people team, and so that's and you are so how do and you all work remotely, right? So how does that work?
I mean, most of us work remotely. We do have headquarters in Bielsko-Biała, but currently there's only like, I think, 15 people in the studio itself. All of us, the rest of us, work remotely. And it's gonna sound simple because it's kind of obvious, but communication is key when you work remotely. And this is something that we learned the hard way during the pandemic. Where everybody started working from home. Basically, we were growing rapidly because we grew from like, I think, 20 or 30 people to 60 in a span of a year. But we invested a lot of time in developing proper communication pipelines and proper reporting pipelines, and it's not perfect still. We're still learning how to do that properly because we, again, scale rapidly. Like we were 60 or 70 people last year, now we're 110, we're still hiring. So with each new hire, your team grows, right? And there are certain milestones in the team growth that require you to implement new communication features and new reporting features that will allow the information to flow freely. Because the biggest danger in running a team this size, but really any size, in my opinion, is lack of understanding of what project we're doing and where are we at with it right now. On an atomic scale of every worker, but also on a department scale and the project scale, right? So you get different tool sets to actually do that. And also when you either like figure that out, you get into a trap that sometimes you have this tendency to go like, oh, we need to talk about it, but it's really hard to get 10 people in a room, right? Or 10 people on a meeting like Google Meet or Zoom or whatever to attend that meeting. So a lot of process is staggered because you cannot find the time slot to actually meet up and discuss a feature. But luckily things like communications like Slack or something have the offline feature where you can just record a video and post it. So we started using it a lot. Like me personally, I just bombard my team with videos of me just talking to the camera about things I think they should know, about feedbacks that they need to hear and stuff like that. So I don't wait for people to come and join my Hangout or whatever. I just record a video and post it and hear it out in your own free time, and they communicate the same way back to me. So this is one of the ways we learned how to make that flow of information more smooth, basically, and continuous to grow. So it really all boils down to that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you sit, if you sit in one office or not. If you cannot meet and talk about features, the process is not going forward, So yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely saw it on our end with, like milestone of like breaking through 8 people. And suddenly it's not so easy to talk like everyone to everyone. The communication breaks at that level. Then there's another one at 15%. Then I feel we are just at the verge of 26 people. Is also kind of different thing with multiple teams. But how do you work, Constante? Like how does it work for you?
Well, we started as 3 people. Communication was great, and then during the development of Book of Demons, we organically grew to 7 and 8, and we were all in one open space. It was loudy and noisy, and it was cool, and communication was still great. And then we split into 2 open spaces once we grew to 12 people, and then we switched to work from home. And yeah, it was very bad. Like during the pandemic, we had the back end. We were prepared because we for years we had we could have facilitated working remotely. And the chaos was insane. Like the communication completely broke down. And like right now, that's a very cool idea. The Kuba mentioned with videos. I have to try that out. Right now, we are running. We have scheduled daily meetings in smaller teams, like project teams, and at fixed hours, and full team meetings. These eat up like 1 hour from each day, but it works well, and we know that we will have to divide the company into two separate flows with 2 projects, and teams will only occasionally communicate between them. That is the plan. Once we grow to 26 people, because that's our goal, and we don't want to grow beyond that.
And are you keeping the company remote now, or?
Yeah, it's difficult not to, because during the pandemic most of our team moved away to different cities, so also recruitment is easier when you just you can be wherever.
So are you guys at Exor working remotely?
No, only on occasion. We're fully on site unless someone has something that keeps him at home, so like a broken leg and still wants to work. That's okay, you can work from home.
Does that happen often at Exor?
No, not often, but it happens. To keeping people at their desk.
To work.
Right. Well, no, we're primarily on site. The pandemic wasn't cool. I mean, we're working remotely like everyone else, but The communication pipeline was definitely lagging. I mean, the people who were happy about it were programmers because they finally, had their time. Nobody coming to them asking them about stuff, so they were happy and they were effective. But for me, like from a management or design perspective, it was a nightmare because you have to talk to people, brainstorm stuff, things are happening, and you can't do that offline. I mean, online. We don't know how to do that effectively, so we're 100% on site.
I do have a question for Łukasz actually, because you guys are working like in a hybrid mode, right? So how do you? Okay, that's how it works. But how do you guys prevent your team on communication breakdown? Because when you're working fully remotely, then it's easier to implement communication pipelines that work seamlessly and in the same way across the departments. But if you have some departments on site and they talk live, then very often, from my experience, there's no track record of things that have been said and done, basically, and agreed upon. So how do you prevent that?
Yeah, we used to not prevent it. And that was not good. Right now, we're actually... the thing is, right now we have 6 active projects at Ansher Studios, and every project is a bit different and unique. And we try to simplify stuff and standardize stuff in, let's say, like in a corporate manner, right? At this size. But on the other hand, like the needs of the project should always, in my opinion, trump the needs of the company, right? It's like you want to create the best environment for a particular video game. And the problem that you mentioned is very prevalent, especially to a project that we're doing that we had at peak we had 100 people at a project, and let's say we have 70 people or 60 people on site, right? And suddenly those 30 people are out of the loop. So what our producers did, mandatory, is that this project, although people were on site, was treated as a remote project from the meetings perspective. Like, for example, playthroughs didn't happen in conference rooms, but on Discord. And everybody joined the Discord. So you had this strange, from my perspective, like what are we even doing here with this remote work? Is like you have 7 people in the room on a Discord channel talking to those 2 people that are remotely, right? And I treat it as a crutch, as a necessity, right? It pisses me off. I would like to have 100% people on site, but it's not that easy, especially that people, it's not even full remote work, right? We have hybrid in a sense that everybody at the studio can take 2 days remote work, right? And there are people who rarely do that, like I, for example, almost never do that. Or there are people who are like on the clock, like 100% of remote days that they can take, they take, right? So suddenly, even though we have over 70 people, 70% of people working full remotely, on site in a hybrid mode, effectively, you have like 50% of people working remotely, right? And it's a nightmare. So second part of it is, at this size, I think that at Exor it doesn't make any sense because everybody's a core team, right? But from our perspective, we try for the core team to be on site, right? So like leads, directors, or if not, like ship them very often into the studio, right? Because we found out that this core team that then conveys those informations to people who implement ideas that we decide upon, you can. And it might sound derogatory, but you can remote work the muscle, right? But it's very hard to remote work the brain in the sense of like, there's a saying at Ansher that we coined from Sabre, it's like hands and heads. There are hands and heads, right? So hands on a remote work are not that problematic, but heads on a remote work are a problem. So we do crutch, we use crutches.
Yeah, so how do we get that from, so Pavel, Exor Studios, 100% of profitable projects, how do we get that? Like what's the, let's cut through the bullshit here.
That's a tricky question. I mean, the secret answer is that we always had our costs super low, like low wages. So that's the secret. and don't spend money on stuff. I mean, we were super stringent on that, and yeah, I mean, there's no secret. I mean, what's to say there? Have low costs and be effective. So that's a silly answer, but yeah, we never wanted to grow. We never wanted to have overhead, and we had to start with super low costs because we were starting as students. We didn't have any funding in the beginning. Like, our first office was in my brother's apartment, so he was sleeping there with one of our founders, and we were going there with food from our parents. So that were really low costs, and that allowed us to, get an external project, get some funding. So in the beginning, we were earning like $10,000 per month for the entire company, and we were saving half of that to bankroll future projects. And then, we were always trying to keep it as low as possible. And then one of the things that we're also doing is we're an engineering company, so we overanalyze everything, and we try to build on our own technology. We also have our own engine, because when we started, we couldn't afford a commercial engine, so we built our own. We were lucky enough to have that expertise, and we are constantly building upon that. We haven't invested in, a bigger office or anything like that. And even though our previous game was successful, the only thing that we raised was salaries. We didn't raise any other costs. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And
So be frugal.
yeah.
Don't spend much. That's the and
Yeah.
be effective. That's not. I don't think that's all of it. So we were meant to talk about culture as well here in the panel, and since culture is just like collective patterns of behavior, like, do you guys have like this? Like, what's the most effective things you guys feel your companies are really good at?
Let me pick that up, since I have a microphone. We automate a lot. Since we're an engineering company, we automate anything that we can. We started very early with, now it's commonplace, continuous integration. We started with that about 10 years ago. We automate functional testing, we automate performance benchmarks. We have, like, for the Rift Breaker, 150 different save files that are loaded and tested every time we can. And even marketing and sales are automated to a degree, running from an Excel file. So if you can remove the human component, do that, because that way you won't be able, you won't have to hire people.
Embrace the machine.
So basically, you pay as little as you can if you can automate people away, right? So that's cool. So we basically we are pretty much what you said. We have our own engine. We are kind of trying to move away from it right now. We automate as much as we can, but we also over-engineer the shit out of it. So our systems are Byzantine, and yeah. And as far as company culture goes, ours is to be like super pro-employee. That's which is not always the best thing from like company owner perspective, because we if someone is not not filling their role well enough, we try to find ways of making it work, and maybe some different tasks, different focus and stuff like that. So that's probably where we are bleeding money, but we strongly believe that it pays back eventually in the long run, because we are cool.
So you don't break your employees' legs if they don't.
No. Only.
It's just trying to keep that joke alive.
Yeah, and we used to strongly believe that common cultural alphabet is very important. So in our case, it was Star Trek, because we were Trekkies in the beginning. So we kind of, like the onboarding process for new employees was basically to watch everything Star Trek related. And, and we went from there. And it worked. Because you have you have common ground, and you have memes that you can share, and it really smooths out the world. It sounds crazy, but Star Trek is very cool. I used to think it sucks. It doesn't. It's very cool.
We're talking about the uniqueness of culture, huh? So yeah, I was thinking hard what to say, like to sound like our company is super cool. And
what's your
are we
alphabet?
very pro-employee? And I'm like, we try to be fair, but pro-employee, I wouldn't say that. It's no. And the thing that popped into my head was I had a discussion with, and he was saying that that's actually as a negative of Unsure Studios, right? But I really liked it. I talked to my creative director of like the biggest game that we're creating right now, codename Mayhem. And he was like, you know what the problem of Anshar is? The problem of Anshar is that we keep trying to invent the wheel. Like we keep trying to do like strange shit. Like, hey, let's make an RPG without combat, or let's make, like right now, for example, a co-op shooter that is not based on wave and tight spots, but it's super fast like Doom, so nobody knows where everybody is, right? It's like why does Anshar keep trying to do something unique, right? And I'm like, isn't game dev like about that? It's like, aren't we trying to do that? So if you look at our portfolio, like there's very hard to see a pattern of what. So that makes us, I think that's a bad thing in a sense that we're not great at like a certain genre. We would love to be, for example, great at RPGs, right? Fool's Theory has a bigger track record here, right? We'd love to have that, but on the other hand, we're like a full stop shop. When we talk to publishers, like, hey, we do our own ports, we optimize stuff, we did remasters, remakes, we worked on the newest technology. We did so many things that it's really hard to surprise us with like a demand from the side of a publisher, because we mostly work with publishers, right? So it might be seen as a negative, but I see it as like it's a place where we really try really different stuff, and it didn't pan out from a hit perspective yet. But hey, we're still here and we're still kicking.
So how does what's the effective cultural thing at Fool's Theory?
Well, there are a few things. One thing is that, yeah, we're trying to be pro-employee. I like to treat my employees like I would be like to be treated. Like you can choose your own type of, contract. We do massive benefits, health, mental health benefits, the regular health and stuff like that. Yes, we do. We have a recruitment booth downstairs. Come and see us. But aside from that, what I do believe in is no bullshit policy, basically. I'd rather tell you straight out how I see things and how we see things and how what the problems are. And we believe in iterative process. So this is something that Hatze we're kind of similar in this situation. He calls it radical truthfulness. I kind of agree. We'd rather say the brutal truth than paint the world in pretty colors, because it just speeds up the iterative process. And I'm a big fan of iterative process. I believe in building up on your past experiences. I hate doing the same tools for every project from the scratch. We still use the same iterative technology that we did for the previous from our first game. So I'm a big fan of building on your own experiences, and in that regard, we're also kind of similar to XOR, because I'm a big fan of automation, and whoever will hear me out, like I always tell them, like teach your developers to script early in the engine, to automate process early, because then a lot of mundane work will just be removed and speed up the whole process, basically. I always, when I was a designer and I would work in the engine, I would hate the situation when you get like a change in your asset and you have like 150 of those assets spread around the game, and you have to find each of them and just click one checkbox. Everybody from you guys probably were in that situation, and you can just write a script in like 5 minutes and it does something in a second. It's free time for you to work on features, and it's free money basically, right?
Yeah,
that you can
like
spend.
why click on 150 objects for half an hour if you can write a script for an hour? That will do the work.
No, actually, that's where ChatGPT comes in handy. It's really hard. But because of that, when we were starting the Thaumaturge project, right, and we knew that we're gonna have a huge task in front of us to do a lot of cinematic content, and we have a lot of it, like 21 hours of cinematic content. We started working on our dialogue tool, and one of the first feature we did was implement generators into it, right? So they can save time of our cinematic designers of setting up cameras, idles, etc., etc. And it resulted in us doing a lot of cinematic content with only 4 cinematic designers, and 3 animators. So it's a really important thing to make your life easier, especially in our game dev, because it just makes better games.
Yeah, so I'll use that as a segue to the growing part of our panel, because you talked about creating pipelines, because growing the studio is not just hiring more people, but also those pipelines. And I know you, Łukasz, wanted to tell us more about, okay, so how do you guys approach learning from project to project? How do you guys do that?
I think that we're still missing a postmortem from Game Deck that we released a couple of years back, so we're great at it. But in all honesty, I see development of a studio very much as a development of technology or a video game, right? It's an iterative process, and you look at stuff. Sometimes you go down an avenue that's suboptimal. You need to, erase that feature, let's say, switch it up. And the most important factor for us, it's like, I try to keep my sanity. I try to not to compare ourselves, right, to like other studios. I try to compare to ourselves from the past, right? It's like, hey, are we a better studio than we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Unsure Studios did a tremendous amount of, from my perspective, progress in the last, for example, 3 years. We truly embraced like AA and forgo the indie premium ways, I would say, right? In terms of pipelines, management, processes, etc., right? So, and these things takes time. Those take time because.
So what's an example of a pipeline that's so different between indie premium and AA?
I would say that the biggest, it's in the team size. Obviously, that's the team size is the main thing, because indie premium for us was like 20, 30 people, right, in peak production, and right now we have, like, for example, projects that have 100 people at peak production, and suddenly this is not a team. You cannot have 100-person team, right? You need to subdivide them into teams, and a lot of companies, for example, are, from my perspective, doing it the wrong way, splitting into the departments, right? It's like a programming department, and then you have the absolute communication hell between departments. You have silos, and hell breaks loose, right? So, for example, one of the biggest changes that we did in the last 2 years, the same thing that I think also after a while CD Projekt Red introduced recently, another indie company, is thematic multidisciplinary teams, right? Like, hey, you're a combat team, you're a level team, you're the narration team or whatever, right? And multi-specialization, not department, not divided by, compartments. Yeah, so this one. So this is an example that was a big cultural shift with a big pushback actually at Anshar at first. There was a big pushback. It's like, hey, programmers want to exchange knowledge with programmers. We don't want to talk with designers. Artists don't want to talk with anybody. It's like, just tell us what to do. And so it was very hard to and we still, I don't think we're there yet, right? But we did tremendous amount of work there, right? So there's a production pipeline. But you also have a lot of administration pipelines there. Tomorrow we have a panel about transparency in salaries, right? So, for example, introducing, like a salary policy that is actually transparent, right? That's one of the things that one point need to do from my perspective. When you're 8 people, you can just say, hey, well, programmer, this is what a programmer, because there's one programmer, so this is what he earns.
So how do you guys approach learning from project to project? Like how's how's things going at Think Tank?
Why do questions change before they reach me? Like I think we started with growing team, and now we are at the learning between projects. Yeah, touche. You know what? I wanted to circle back to the question you asked, Pavel, and I wasn't able to to contribute to. And I think one of because our games also, all our games were successful and
profitable.
Yeah. Just not enough for me to, not have mortgage on my house, but profitable. And I think one of very important aspects here for us is not necessarily making the games you would love to make, but making the games that players would like to pay for to play.
And how do you find that?
Through a difficult process, and breaking yourself to not to do the thing you think would be super awesome, but to basically engineer the game in a way that would be appealing to the customer, and it's something that not many studios do actually. Like there is a disconnect between the target group and what design does afterwards. So yeah, and back to your new question about learning. We are super introspective, so we tend to overthink stuff. Crazy amount of overthinking is taking place, and it's difficult on people because we tend, like one guy told us that. Everything, like if he had to say one bad thing about the company, the team, is that everything takes super long because there is too much thinking. So we kind of took this to heart, and we are like more
doubling down.
Yeah, we are just more violent speed momentum kind of development, because the more violence, that's extra weight. So we tend to do postmortems. We try to develop new tools, not just the development tools, but management tools to track progress.
Are you developing your own management tools?
Yes. Like for Book of Demons, we actually were not using Jira for most of the project. We wrote our own Jira in Google spreadsheets. So we had this super insanely resource-heavy spreadsheet. We were half joking that we could start selling this instead of the game because it was awesome. Like it was tracking burn rates. Programmers, each team member could check their tasks and discuss them inside the tool, and it was Google spreadsheets. So yeah, we do.
Yeah, cool.
Can I add to that learning part? So one thing that we changed from Xmorph Defense to the Riftbreaker is we learned to drop some of the typical formalized parts of game development, like we dropped drawing concepts and lengthy design processes. We decided to design through implementation. So we didn't develop a gameplay prototype for the Riftbreaker. Like the Riftbreaker was the prologue was.
So you invented the production process?
I mean, no. For Xmorph Defense, we had a formal prototype. We didn't have that phase for the Riftbreaker. We dropped that. We moved straight to production because we knew that we don't have so much time. So we removed that. And our learning process was to remove the redundant parts as much as possible.
Yeah, one more thing that we learned, and is to not to design everything up front, because we used to do that. Like for Book of Demons, we had a complete design with every single detail. We had a minimum plan in case money ran out, and that's the one that happened. And the maximum plan, it never happened. And that's right now, like with Hellcard and future projects, we generally, if we see that the design is airtight, more or less, we just move into the implementation phase, and we iron out the systems and stuff like that on the go.
So yeah, I want to chip into that. This is actually something that dawned on me quite a few months ago, that whatever you think about your game that it will be and how it will be played, it's wrong, basically. Before you actually implement it and test it, it's just your idea, man. Like the meme.
Yeah, even if you have a prototype,
like. Yeah, and this is something that I cannot speak about my team, because I think my team made an enormous progress throughout the Thaumaturge production. But looking at the road that we took from 9 years when we were designing 7 and then designing the Thaumaturge. When I was designing 7, I was like a 5-year-old on a sugar rush, basically, and thinking like, oh, I'm gonna drop this and that, and they're gonna, the synergy will be there between the systems. And I kind of want to do everything. And when we were designing the Thaumaturge, it was actually, we came out with a certain idea, with a certain prototype, but then the axe started falling and we started cutting off everything that it doesn't feed the fantasy that we wanted. And at the end, not a lot of the original idea was left, basically, because until you playtest it, and more importantly, until someone else playtests it, not you, then you're not sure if the idea works. So what we did is we actually invested a lot of time, and it took a lot of time for us to find that identity of the game that we wanted to do. And obviously not everybody has that luxury of having extra time to playtest and redo, because at some point you need to move from pre-production to production. But there's also like a cutoff line when you decide that, look, this is like the 5th time we're redoing the idea, maybe it's just wrong. Maybe we should just drop it,
You don't have to move from pre-production to production if you start with production.
Yeah, I know. That's a life hack that's worth having in mind. We kind of did it with 7, just went with it.
So let me just summarize what we talked to here today. It's like, take debt, be frugal, break your employees' legs if they work remote too much. Start with production instead of any other formal phases before that. And am I forgetting any nuggets of knowledge that we shared here today? Yeah. Don't pay people too much. And if you can exchange them for technology. And less people, more machine. Embrace the machine. Okay, so thank you all for coming to our panel. Yeah, and we have still like 10 minutes for your questions. 55. 56 minutes, okay? We have 6 minutes, so come ask questions, and we'll have beautiful answers for them. Any questions, anyone?
Or don't.
There's a mic.
Okay, I'll ask a question regarding your approach to hits, because you've mentioned hits a few times, and it sounded to me like you see hits as something that happens somewhat randomly to the project. On the other hand, and allow me to load the question a bit to make it more fun, there were projects, even in Poland right now, Manor Lords is a very good example. I also believe Hellish Court was a game that hit the mainstream. Or we can look abroad with games like Palworld, when if you look at the production there, it was completely crazy, but they still managed to, like, I don't know how many, 10x, 100x their investment. Do you see hits, if you're making anything creative, hits are somewhat random, but at some point there aren't, because there is something in them that makes them a hit. So is your approach that it's going to happen, maybe somewhat randomly, or is it like is there some value to approaching a project thinking to yourself, this is going to 10x my investment?
I'm not big on casinos and gambling, and that's like, you know, the chance that your game will be a hit. That's not the way to run a studio.
Yeah, but I mean, you can maximize in your head maximize the chance. So you know, you can read the interviews with the creators of Pal World, how they, you know, added guns to Pokemons because that this on.
Yeah, but this is fooling yourself.
Yeah, I agree. You know, Hellish Court that you mentioned wasn't done to maximize as a hit. It was because Kuba had an immense love for fencing, basically, and he wanted to do a fencing game, and it kind of blasted off.
So, like, my approach to that, and you need to like, and I highly recommend 2 books on this by Nicholas Taleb. It's Anti-Fragile and Black Swan. Black Swan specifically addresses this, and you can go through your entire life trying to make video games and never have a hit, and you can make super hot at your first try out of the college and you can have a hit, right? So the only thing that you can actually do, the only thing that you do control is the process, sustainability of the process, and maximizing your chances. But you don't engineer like a sure hit. Like nobody, like if somebody telling you, yeah, I know it will be a hit, it's bullshit. If you talk to Sven Vinke, when he has like not dozens, but many RPGs under his belt, there were dark times in his head when he was afraid if Baldur's Gate 3 is gonna be a hit, right? So like nobody really knows, right? The only thing you can do is maximize your chances. So how I like to put it is that Yoda was a liar, basically, right? There is no do, there is only try. That is the actual, like, you can only try.
Yeah, and if you spend time on maximizing your chances for a hit on a single game, how much can you squeeze out of it? Like 0.5% more? I doubt it. And if you can spend this time making like 50% of a different game, that will have another 2%, 1%, maybe, no, 0.03% or something like that. But generally, it's better to have to play more times.
Yeah, I'd say that you should plan to have more chances, right? That's exactly. I mean, when you get a game that shows sign of becoming a hit, well, you can double down on that, but you're never sure. Even when we were releasing the Riftbreaker, which was 10 times more successful than anything we've done before, we were never sure if it's going to be a hit. So we were still planning contingencies and having plans for if it doesn't work out. So you're never sure.
Did we answer your question?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question about publishers. You were saying that it's full of pit traps and pitfalls and traps, and I'd like to know what are the biggest ones.
We used to be a publisher before Think Tank, and we published the games, and it's a business meant to kind of siphon money from developers, and the business model, like they people who are publishers might have good intentions, but ultimately, if they want to be profitable, they have to invest in titles that have biggest chances of success. So and that it won't necessarily be you. So this is it, and you might expect some investment from them, effort invested, money on marketing and stuff like that. But if they don't see the numbers, it won't happen. You might have it in a contract, it won't happen.
Yeah, well, minimal commitments will happen, so
yeah,
make sure you have
MGs,
them in your agreement.
Of course, but still, it's that's all there is. And yeah, some publishers are better than others. Ultimately, with most publishers, like we are lucky, we don't have that. Our publisher is great. Ultimately, you will always have publisher try to change something in your product. Like, yeah, even if it's something small or just removing skeletons so you can be certified in China or something like that.
So now that we've also blasted working with publishers, let's move on to the next question, like the last question, and we'll wrap up.
Okay, so guys, if I remember correctly, at least some of you used to cooperate on different projects together, and I wonder what was the impact for your development of these cooperations?
So is it us? Is it us? I think
Probably.
it's us.
At least I know about you. So
Full Theory brought us along to cooperate with Larian on Divinity Original Sin 2 on the DLCs, and I just can say that working with free companies, but asterisk here, free amazing companies, like everybody wants to do the best game, have like a different culture, and like for us it was a big growing experience. Like afterwards I think we were a much better developer than we were previously, both on the account of, hey, this is how full security works, what can we add to our gene pool, right? And the same with Larian. So for me that was great.
was it the same for Kuba?
Yeah, it was actually.
Blink twice.
We really like to co-dev with other people because it's always a chance to actually learn new things that are done in a different way. And like I learned immensely from how Larian does things, but also how structured is Unsure, how their producers work. Like those guys have one of the best producers I met till that day, and they taught us how to make our own structure. That's why we now have also awesome producers, But that was the learning experience that we got at the very beginning, because we were always design heavy, not really thinking about structure. And that cooperation basically forced us to structure our own development process. And we've been cooperating since then on a few other things, and it always has been a pleasure experience. So, yeah, I highly recommend you guys do this, because the reality is that sometimes you will get a project that you can either do with a different company, as a codev, or you can just make it pass you, and because you don't have the capacity. I would encourage you to actually bring in your friends from other companies to cooperate on that, because then everybody wins. So, yeah.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, thank you for participating in the panel. Thank you all for coming and listening to us, and give us a thumbs up and subscribe to whatever this is posted on, and thank you and bye-bye.